Okay, this is a video to show you how to clean one of these air-free air sterilizers. This unit is called the Onix 3000, I guess. And well, we've had this for several years, and I had noticed that it was a little bit dusty, particularly looking down in there on that metal grate. It looked dusty. So I thought I would take it apart and vacuum it out. Now, this is one of those units that's not designed to be opened. It's not designed to be cleaned out. But I did find on the internet a fellow who had opened one of these in order to do a repair on the electronic board. And so it's a little difficult to find that video because it's in Spanish, but when I typed in the keywords for Onix 3000 air free, it did come up because in his comments he did have those words. So I was able to see what he did. Now, he took out these 6 screws. This bottom plate, pretty much you can swing out at 90 degrees. And then he pried apart all of these 3 sides. And he might even have possibly snapped something along holding it together because he didn't show every single step. And he was a little bit justified in doing that because the unit was broken. And he had to resolder a loose joint on the circuit board that was inside. Now, actually, it turns out that if that's all you needed to do, you could have done that without taking these 4 sides apart. But anyway, I didn't take the 4 sides apart, and the reason was because as I started to do it, it seemed to me like it was going to break. So I didn't do it. Having taken the base and swung it out, I did vacuum out the interior from this end, okay? And that gets you to a certain distance, but not all the way up to that top plate, for example. Now, what I did with this top plate, I just took this really small red straw. I attached it with some duct tape to the end of a shop vac. And I just pushed it down, and then I just swept it around over the top of that grate and any of the areas on the top that would look a little bit dusty. And it turned out it did work. And it was far easier than taking this apart. It may have been totally unnecessary because that dust may have not been doing any harm. The dust that potentially could have done harm would have been the dust that would have actually, let's say, gone through those little holes and then possibly settled into the heating unit, okay? Because the heating unit has those channels in it. And if those channels got clogged, that might affect the operation. So I would recommend when this is not being used that you put a cover over the top of it so it doesn't collect dust, which would just drop down over it. If you cover it when it's not being used, it wouldn't get dusty. Now, when it's being used, that heater creates an airflow of rising air. And it tends not to collect dust while it's in operation because the airflow is in the opposite direction. This is a little bit different. Actually, I should say it's a lot different than most air cleaners. Most air cleaners have a fan and a filter. Now, this is not an air cleaner. This is what they call an air sterilizer. This is actually a bit of a gimmick. So the way this is supposed to work, according to their description and also according to their patent that you can look up with this patent number on the bottom of it, which is, there you can read it, 5874050 for more details. That is a ceramic cylinder. It's 5 inches tall. It's got 20 holes in it. It has a nichrome wire, which goes through. It's wrapped through all the 20 holes. And what this does is it uses 50 watts of electrical power to heat up that core. Now that core, when it gets hot, is like a little chimney, or you might say 20 little chimneys. The idea is that in the very center of that, it's going to get very hot. Towards the ends of it, it's not as hot, but in the very middle of it, it gets hot. According to the documents, like 400 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to sterilize or kill the airborne objects such as virus, bacteria, or mold. Okay, and those objects are carried on air currents. They suspended in the air for a certain period of time before they settle to the ground. This creates a flow of air because of this so-called chimney or stack effect. And those things will, because they're being carried on the air, will flow through this thing. They will get very hot, such that they will die. They might get burnt. However, they pretty much will continue to just rise up, now inactivated or dead, through the top here. And then they continue to go into your room and settle out onto the floor. Whether or not it's any healthier for you to be breathing in a dead mold spore or a live mold spore, I really don't know. And there's nothing to clean here. And the reason is because very little collects inside of it. You might think that you might get some ash or something in the center of those tubes, okay? But it turns out, if you shine a flashlight in the far end of this, and you can almost see one I have lined up there, you'll see, even though this has been used quite a bit, those channels are quite empty. They're quite clear, okay? All of them. Nothing is really building up in there. I don't see any ash. In their descriptions, they are incredibly vague. They say the amount of ash is so small as to be meaningless or what have you. And another thing about this, which is a little bit bothering / puzzling, and that is that when you look, this is the so-called P3000 unit, which goes for about $300 plus. This comes in a 2000 and a 1000 unit, which they claim that they're for smaller rooms, but when you look at them, they have exactly the same size core, and they use a slightly smaller power. So the nichrome wire might be slightly adjusted so they have less power, might create less flow, and those prices go down to about $200 now. The actual cost to manufacture these is identical for all of these. This is a matter of trying to have people who have more money to buy a more expensive model, and people who have less money to still give them something to buy. Of course, this is an extremely common technique in our society. If you look at their documents, there is no evidence at all to show that the different sizes of these units have any real difference. I'm going to guess that they do run a smaller amount of current through the smaller units. Either they don't wire up all of the 20 channels, or they're not quite as hot, the airflow is a little bit less, and therefore they can justify that it's designed for a smaller room, and it does use less power. So you might say, well, if I had a smaller room. But the reality on something like this is they do not spec this for any metrics relating to the flow of air, how much cubic feet of air per minute, or anything like that. They refuse to try to perform any sort of a comparison of this product with other conventional fan-driven units, which are designed to remove particulates from the air. This does not remove particulates from the air. The claim is that it will sterilize them. I'm sure it has some truth in that it does kill a bacteria that goes into it or what have you, but how that relates to the human health of it, it may be largely variable or possibly even psychological. When you look at the reviews on this, they're fairly split between some people thinking that it's a complete hoax and some people thinking that they feel better now that they have it. Okay, it's a definite bad sign that if you look at the more modern, recent models of this, they now come out with different colors. For example, see how this one has this glow? Well, that is just a nightlight. It has nothing to do with the operation. And on the more expensive models now, the nightlight is multicolored. Okay, And that might be a feature because now they're advertising that it's going to de-stress. It will de-stress you. This is called the stress light because it makes you feel better. This is, in many ways, a feel-good product, like Yogi Throat Comfort. This soothes the throat. This might be a feel-good product too. But at least you kind of know how this works. It's like a bag of tea. This is, I'm very suspicious. I'm very suspicious. It uses 50 watts. Because the airflow is so small, it has to be operated 24 hours a day, they say, in order to clear out a room. And to clear out a room or to sanitize the room, they claim, could take weeks of use before it gets to that point because the flow is so small. Now, most rooms, there is some flow through the room. You open the door, air comes in, air goes out. This, I don't think, can really keep up with it. And the other thing about it is, it's not healthy to have a room that's closed up like that. Okay? Normally in a room, you want, if you had a source of mold, for example, this is not what you would use to get rid of that. You should get rid of the mold by other techniques so that you don't have mold in that room, okay? If you have spores that are coming in from the outside, you've got to close the window. They would be coming in at a much larger rate than this could possibly keep up with, in my opinion. This is just a suspicion on my part, okay? Partially because of the way it's marketed, the way I can see that these different size units, the way they're pricing it, the way they sell it at stores like the Sharper Image. I couldn't get a rating on Consumer Reports because of the different technology that's used. They don't even compare this with the other conventional air filtration systems. Anyway, that's enough. I just wanted to give you some info on this. If you were wanting to do anything with this, such as take it apart, okay, it can be done the way I described.